Have you ever wanted to learn English but felt completely blocked because you couldn't afford the staggering costs of expensive classes, intensive courses, or private teachers? If so, you are absolutely not alone. This feeling of being financially restricted, of having your educational goals held hostage by a price tag, is one of the most common and most discouraging hurdles for aspiring language learners around the globe. It is a powerful and persistent misconception that high-quality language acquisition is synonymous with high-cost programs. We are led to believe that the key to unlocking fluency is hidden within the walls of a prestigious language school or locked behind a pricey digital subscription. When I started my journey toward English fluency, this was my reality. I simply did not have the money to spend on courses. I didn't attend any formal language schools. I didn't hire private tutors. My budget for English education was, quite literally, zero. And yet, over time, I built a level of proficiency that allowed me to become fluent, confident, and comfortable speaking with people from all around the world, from casual conversations to professional settings. So, how did I manage this seemingly impossible feat? That is exactly what I'm going to share with you in this comprehensive guide. We will dismantle the myth of expensive learning and lay out a practical, no-cost framework that will allow you to achieve the same results. And here is the most encouraging part. You can follow the exact same steps starting today. You don't need to spend money to make profound progress. What you need is focus, creativity, discipline, and the right set of daily habits. By the end of this article, you will see that your phone, your free time, your physical environment, and your existing interests can collectively become the most effective and affordable language teachers you will ever have. Let's dive right into the heart of this independent learning revolution. Part 1: The misconception about courses and the power of intention. Let's start with a foundational and often ignored truth. Courses can certainly help, but they are not magic. The language learning industry, which is a global market valued in the tens of billions, often sells the promise of fluency as a product. Some people genuinely believe that paying for expensive classes is a guarantee of proficiency. They invest huge sums, operating under the implicit assumption that the financial transaction itself is the primary driver of success. But think about it honestly. How many people do you know who have attended language courses for years, perhaps even decades, and still cannot speak confidently when put on the spot? They have the certificates, the textbooks, and the student ID cards, but they lack real-world, spontaneous fluency. The truth is stark. Fluency comes from consistent, high-quality, and meaningful practice, not from the price tag or the institution's name. When I fully grasped this concept, I stopped wasting energy worrying about what I couldn't afford. Instead, I shifted my entire focus to what I could control: my own practice habits, my daily commitment, and my personal learning strategy. That moment of realization was the genesis of my fluency journey. It was when I discovered, definitively, that you can build deep and lasting English proficiency completely on your own, provided you embrace the role of your own teacher and curriculum designer. This is the power of intention, the decision to stop being a passive student and start being an active learner. Part 2: Free resources are everywhere. Learning to filter the noise. The internet is often described as a vast ocean of information. For the language learner, it is an ocean absolutely teeming with free resources. So many, in fact, that the sheer volume can feel immediately overwhelming, leading to analysis paralysis. But here is the single most important key to navigating this wealth of free content. You don't need everything. You just need to choose wisely and use what you choose consistently. I learned to be extremely deliberate in my selection. I wasn't just consuming content. I was selecting tools for specific skills. For listening practice, I utilized free podcasts on topics I genuinely loved: history, science, comedy, engaging YouTube channels with passionate creators, and free audiobooks offered through library programs or open source sites. For reading, I focused on accessible, relevant content like international blogs, news articles, open source literature, free ebooks, and Reddit threads on my hobbies. For speaking, I developed self-talk methods and voice recording practices, eliminating the need for an expensive conversation partner early on. For writing, I engaged with free online communities, language exchange forums, and used basic, no-cost digital journaling apps. In every case, the resources were free, but my committed effort was priceless. This simple reality underscores the entire philosophy. You are trading money for time, and that time must be invested with intention. Part 3. The Power of Self-Study. Creating your personal curriculum. The first habit that fundamentally transformed my English proficiency was embracing self-study as my primary methodology. Instead of passively waiting for a teacher or a course structure to guide me, I took complete ownership of my education. I became the architect of my own learning journey. The first step was establishing an unbreakable routine. I set aside a minimum of 30 to 60 minutes every single day just for English. There were no excuses, no maybe tomorrow moments. It became a fixed appointment in my day, non-negotiable. Crucially, I ensured variety within this dedicated time. My self-study routine was structured to be adaptable. Some days, the full time was dedicated to intensive listening comprehension. Some days focused solely on active speaking practice, self-talk, and recording. Other days were reserved for comprehensive reading and vocabulary mining. The remainder of the time was used for structured writing exercises. This deliberate structure allowed me to build a personal curriculum that directly matched my needs and goals. I wasn't studying the historical context of a language I'd never use. I was learning the vocabulary and sentence structures relevant to my life and career. The most significant advantage of being my own teacher was the speed and relevance of my learning. I learned faster because I didn't waste a single minute on filler material or concepts I had already mastered. I practiced exactly what was most useful for my specific context. And that's something many expensive, one-size-fits-all courses simply cannot give you: the freedom, flexibility, and hyper-efficiency to choose your own path. Part 4. Listening for free, training the ear for real-world English. The development of superior listening comprehension was my first major operational step. My goal was to train my ears to understand English in real-world, unscripted, and rapid-fire situations, moving past the slow, hyper-articulated speech often found in beginner textbooks. Here is the exact, zero-cost methodology I employed to make my listening time highly effective. Immersive contextual listening, the commute/chores method. I listened to English language podcasts or news broadcasts while I was walking, commuting, cleaning the house, or cooking dinner. I focused on content that interested me: tech reviews, historical analysis, or interviews. The key here is to make English a background constant in your life, not a periodic task. Active engagement with YouTube. I watched videos on topics I genuinely enjoyed. This could be anything from a travel vlog to a documentary about astrophysics. Crucially, I used subtitles in the beginning not as a crutch, but as a tool to map the spoken sound to the written word, significantly accelerating my vocabulary acquisition and linking pronunciation with spelling. The repetition and shadowing technique. This is one of the most powerful free tools available. I would listen to a short segment, a sentence, or a key phrase, and then pause the recording. I would immediately repeat the phrase out loud, attempting to perfectly copy the speaker's intonation, accent, rhythm, and speed. This shadowing practice trains the mouth muscles and the brain simultaneously, preparing you for natural conversation. At first, this process was difficult. I would often only catch a few isolated words, feeling like I was listening through water. But I remained consistent, trusting the process of neural pattern recognition. Soon, my brain started to recognize grammatical patterns, common phrases, and the natural musicality of the language. The profound beauty of free listening resources is that they are practically endless and constantly refreshed. You can choose music, fictional stories, complex interviews, lectures, or simple explainers, whatever you love. When learning feels like a continuation of a hobby, when it's genuinely fun and tied to your interests, your motivation remains high, and you are far less likely to give up. Part 5. Speaking without a partner, the power of monologue. Perhaps the single hardest psychological hurdle for the self-learner is speaking. The common, paralyzing thought is, I have no one to practice with, so I can't improve my speaking. This is unequivocally not true. I practice speaking every single day, even when I was completely alone and had no human partner to converse with. I transformed the simple act of existing into a daily speech rehearsal. The monologue techniques, descriptive self-talk, the running commentary I learned to narrate my life in real time, in English. I described simple actions. I'm making a cup of tea. First, I boil the water. Now, I'm waiting for the kettle to click off. I articulated my daily plans. Tomorrow, I will study vocabulary for an hour, and then I want to call my sister. This forces you to think spontaneously and construct basic, functional sentences. Storytelling and explanation. I practiced retelling events from my day, explaining a complex article I had just read, or summarizing a movie or series I had watched. The goal wasn't just to speak, but to practice the structure of narrative, using transition words, chronological markers, and clear descriptive language. Voice recording and self-correction. This is the ultimate zero-cost speaking drill. Using my phone's default recording app, I would speak for 3 to 5 minutes on a random topic, e.g., the best advice I ever received, or why I prefer cats over dogs. At first, listening back to my own voice felt incredibly strange, and I was hyper-aware of my mistakes. But this discomfort was a catalyst for growth. Over time, I listened with a critical ear, identifying my most common errors, pronunciation, confusing verb tenses, incorrect prepositions, and correcting them in the next day's recording. This entire practice regimen cost nothing but time, yet it provided a massive boost in confidence. By the time I engaged in a real, live conversation with another person, the machinery of my mouth and brain was already warmed up. I had built a huge library of simple, pre-rehearsed sentence structures. I wasn't starting from scratch, I was ready to engage. Part 6. Reading for free, building vocabulary and grammar organically. The development of a strong reading habit was another cornerstone of my fluency, again achieved without spending a single coin on formal textbooks or course materials. I made a conscious decision to substitute expensive learning resources with the vast, free repository of the internet. I didn't buy textbooks. Instead, I focused on high-quality, authentic materials. International news blogs, in-depth Wikipedia pages on complex subjects, informative articles related to my profession, and even the naturalistic language found in the subtitles of movies or TV shows. The principle of interest and active reading. The key element that maintained my motivation was adhering strictly to the principle of interest. If I was fascinated by technology, I read articles from tech magazines. If I was passionate about philosophy, I read philosophical essays. This way, I stayed intensely motivated and, crucially, I picked up natural, contextual vocabulary that was immediately relevant to my life. I also learned to transition from passive reading to active reading. Contextual guesswork. When I encountered a new word, my first instinct was to guess its meaning from the surrounding context, not to immediately reach for a dictionary. This strengthens cognitive ability and speed of comprehension. Highlighting and categorizing. I highlighted new words and phrases, but only checked the dictionary at the end of a reading session, consolidating my lookups. I kept simple lists of these new words categorized by topic, e.g., work vocabulary, travel phrases, immersion in authentic language. By reading materials written for native speakers, I was absorbing correct grammar, sentence flow, and punctuation organically without ever having to memorize a rule. My brain simply began to recognize the correct pattern and structure through constant exposure. Over time, active reading improved not only the breadth and depth of my vocabulary, but also my intuitive grasp of complex English grammar. Part 7. Writing without teachers. Structuring thought into coherent language. Developing the skill of writing is essential because it is conversation at a slower pace. It trains your ability to organize thoughts, structure arguments, and transition between ideas. This, too, can be developed completely for free. I began with the simplest, most intimate form of writing, a personal journal. Every evening, I committed to writing a short summary of my day, even if it was just 5 sentences in English. Nobody checked it, nobody corrected it, but the habit itself was an intensive training process for sentence formation, verb conjugation, and simple expression. The accountability was only to myself. Finding free feedback and community. To move beyond the uncorrected journal, I sought out free online platforms and communities. Language exchange forums. Websites dedicated to language exchange often have dedicated writing sections where native speakers volunteer to offer corrections on short texts, essays, or stories. I would reciprocate by offering help in my native language. Commenting and engaging. I began posting short, thoughtful comments on English language forums, blogs, and especially on YouTube videos related to my interests. The replies I received, and the effort I put into constructing clear, correct responses were invaluable real-time writing practice. Short story practice. I occasionally challenged myself to write short, simple fictional stories. This pushed me to use more descriptive adjectives and varied narrative tenses. Through these writing exercises, I learned how to logically organize ideas and make my sentences clearer and more persuasive. It was, in effect, like practicing a slow-motion, highly edited version of conversation, where I had all the time in the world to ensure grammatical perfection and clarity. Part 8. Thinking in English, the internal shift to fluency. This is perhaps the single most powerful, high-leverage change I made, and it is entirely free. I began the process of learning to think directly in English. In the initial stages of learning, I followed the frustrating, slow, and indirect route. I would form a thought in my native language, translate it word for word into English, and then speak or write the resulting, often unnatural sentence. This process of continuous translation is a massive barrier to true fluency. I realized that if I wanted to achieve spontaneous, fluent speech, I needed to train my brain to skip the translation step and process information directly in the target language. The practice of inner monologue. I started small and consistently practiced this mental habit. Labeling the environment. When I saw an object, I didn't think its name in my native language. I immediately labeled it in English. That's a tree. The kettle is boiling. The traffic light is red. Internal narratives. As my skill grew, I expanded this to full sentences and internal monologues. I should go shopping later this afternoon. I need to cook dinner and buy some new vegetables. I wonder what the weather will be like tomorrow. Decision-making. I began to consciously make simple decisions in English, weighing pros and cons in the language itself. This mental habit required no course, no app, and no teacher. It simply required conscious, daily effort. The result was transformative. It made speaking not just faster, but genuinely more natural, as my internal language processing began to mimic that of a native speaker. Part 9. Free interaction opportunities. Breaking the isolation barrier. Eventually, my goal was to move my rehearsed fluency into the real world. I needed to use my English with real people in real time, but my initial no-spending rule remained firm. I would not pay for conversation tutors. The internet and local communities are a goldmine of free interaction opportunities if you know where to look and are willing to put in the effort to engage. Online language exchange communities, the reciprocal trade. I joined platforms dedicated to language exchange, such as Tandem or HelloTalk. The key to success here is reciprocity. I was willing to spend 30 minutes helping a native English speaker practice my native language in exchange for 30 minutes of English conversation practice. This is a mutually beneficial, entirely free transaction. Volunteer-hosted speaking clubs. In many major cities, local groups, libraries, or community centers host free, informal speaking clubs, often facilitated by retired teachers, volunteers, or international students. A simple online search often reveals these hidden gems. The power of comments and forums. As mentioned, posting insightful comments on YouTube or joining a hobby-based online forum, Reddit, etc., provided a steady stream of low-pressure, written, and sometimes even spoken, via voice notes on messaging apps, interaction practice with native and fluent speakers. The core principle here is finding ways to connect for free by leveraging your existing interests and time. If you seek interaction, you will undoubtedly find it. Part 10: Building Habits, Not Pressure, English as a Daily Tool. The ultimate differentiator in my journey was not the individual resources I used. It was the quality and persistence of my habits. I stopped treating English as an academic subject that required dedicated, painful study sessions. I started treating it like a tool, an integral part of my daily life, seamlessly integrated into my routine. The commuter's lesson. I always listened to English podcasts or audiobooks during my daily commute, maximizing dead time. The cook's dialogue. I practiced self-talk while cooking, describing the steps of the recipe or musing on the day. The nightly reader. I read articles or a chapter of a free ebook before bed instead of mindlessly scrolling social media. The internal check. I consciously switched to thinking in English when making important decisions or solving problems. Little by little, these consistent, low-pressure habits compounded. Because the only cost was time and focus, I never felt the financial stress of wasting money on a program that might not work. This reduced pressure made the learning process sustainable and enjoyable. The goal was to reach a point where I was learning English by living, not by studying. Part 11. Advantages of learning without courses. A strength, not a weakness. Let me share a surprising insight. Not paying for courses actually gave me significant, tangible advantages that a student reliant on a paid curriculum might miss out on. Radical independence and autonomy. I was forced to become an independent learner. I couldn't wait for a teacher to tell me what to do or when to do it. This instilled a powerful sense of ownership and personal responsibility over my education. Hyperrelevance and efficiency. I learned only what I truly needed to achieve my personal goals. There were no unnecessary grammar drills or lessons on obscure vocabulary. Every minute was spent on high-yield, high-relevance practice. Unshakable confidence. My confidence was developed through self-guidance and proven self-mastery. I saw daily that I could manage my own learning, which is a far more robust form of self-belief than one derived from a certificate. Zero opportunity cost. I saved money and used it for other things that enriched my life, such as traveling, which then provided me with the ultimate opportunity to use my newly acquired English skills. If you currently believe that not having money for courses is a weakness, I urge you to change your perspective. When embraced with a growth mindset, it is a strength, a pathway to a more tailored, efficient, and deeply personal fluency. Part 12: Mistakes I made and lessons learned. The refinement process. Of course, the journey was not without its missteps. Understanding these common mistakes can help you skip the frustrating learning curve. The collector's mistake, resource overload. At first, I was a digital hoarder. I collected too many resources. I downloaded every free app, saved hundreds of grammar websites, and subscribed to countless channels, but I never consistently used them. Lesson learned. Simplicity is the key to consistency. Choose 1 or 2 high-quality resources for each skill and use them religiously before moving on. Fewer tools, greater depth. The rush to fluency, unrealistic timelines. I made the mistake of setting an expectation that I would become fluent in 3 to 6 months. When that didn't happen, I felt a deep sense of frustration and failure. Lesson learned. Fluency is a long-term game, a gradual process of consistent, small improvements. Daily effort brings real, lasting, and cumulative results, but they take time to become visible. Measure progress year to year, not week to week. The fear of error, the perfection trap. I initially wanted to speak and write perfectly, which led to a crippling hesitation to speak at all. I would freeze, paralyzed by the fear of grammar mistakes or incorrect pronunciation. Lesson learned. Perfection is an illusion that actively blocks fluency. Once I embraced mistakes as necessary feedback, as indicators of what I needed to practice next, I began to improve at a much faster rate. Mistakes are the cost of progress. Part 13, Real Results. The proof of self-guided learning. So, what was the cumulative outcome after months of diligent, free practice? The results were not dramatic one morning, but they accumulated into a profound capability. I reached a point where I could understand movies and TV shows without needing subtitles. A massive benchmark of comprehension. I was able to have spontaneous, complex conversations online and in person without the mental freezing or translation lag that once defined my efforts. I confidently wrote detailed emails and was even able to give short, clear presentations in English at work, communicating complex professional ideas effectively. All of this was accomplished without spending a single dollar on formal, paid instruction. The entire secret to this success story wasn't money, prestige, or a magic course. It was unwavering consistency and intelligent application of free resources. Conclusion, final message, your power to choose. Let's bring everything together and solidify the core message of this guide. I learned English without paying for a single course, a private tutor, or an expensive app subscription. My success was built on a foundation of free resources, a self-designed study routine, and the daily integration of English into my life. I relentlessly practiced all 4 skills: listening, speaking, reading, and writing, and most importantly, I trained myself to think directly in English. If you are currently feeling discouraged because you don't have money for expensive courses, I want you to understand that this feeling is not a life sentence. You already possess every single resource you need to start this journey. The internet, your phone, your immediate environment, and, most crucially, your determination and capacity for self-discipline. Do not delay your dream. Start today. Speak to yourself out loud and narrate your day. Listen to English content you genuinely enjoy during your downtime. Write a few sentences in a journal or comment on a blog. Read something interesting every single day. Think in English as much as possible, challenging your internal monologue. Remember this simple, profound equation. Fluency is not about money. It's about consistency. I encourage you to take ownership of your education. If you found this guide helpful, apply these strategies immediately. What single, free habit will you commit to starting today?